Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Transgender Show. I am your host. My name is Emily. I am usually the host. Let's say that. Tonight, we have a slightly different episode. I'll be the one in the hot seat, and we have a guest host. My friend Andy will be taking over in just a minute, and she'll be asking me all the questions. So now you get to see about my story and ask questions about me and what's going on with my life. Andy, welcome.
Thanks. So just to kind of set the stage, Emily and I have the unique story of having met for the first time twice. Not unlike the intro. I also talk with my hands, so be prepared for some quality Ricky Bobbiness, happening over here. So the second time we met at Tiki in Ventura at this tiki bar, and we were chatting. We were like, "Oh man, you seem really cool. Like, we both live near here. We should definitely meet up at the tiki bar again sometime." And we started putting each other's numbers in our phones to just kind of text and be like, "Oh, this is Andy. This is Emily." And as I was doing that, I realized, and Emily did too, we already had an ongoing text conversation from probably 6 months earlier when we had met at a different tiki bar at Disneyland.
Mm-hmm. Very many miles away. Yeah.
And we had apparently had the same conversation where we were like, "Oh, you seem really cool. We should definitely meet up again. Like, let's exchange numbers so that we can do this."
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't meet again at Disneyland that day, but we did inevitably meet again at Tiki. And that time we stayed in contact, which was really exciting.
That time it stuck. The first time we were bad about keeping in touch, but fate was just like, no, come on, try it again.
We have to meet again and again. Yeah. And given the content of the show, you might think I met Emily in a previous sort of like Life Guys, but that was not the case. I met her as Emily both times. So just complete universe brought us together twice. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really honored to be able to interview you so that you can share your story with all the viewers, like now and in the future.
Well, I hope it's a good one.
Great. It'll be great. So do you want to I have all your questions here. Do you want to just kind of like give us a broad overview, and we'll start there, like sort of your story, your life story as a whole, so that we can kind of get the full picture and then kind of dive down into the details?
Yeah. So we usually start with, when did you first realize you were different? And for me, my story really kind of starts at a certain point and then jumps backwards. I wasn't one of the girls that spent my whole life feeling like I was a girl. I was trapped in the wrong body. It wasn't until I was in my early teen years or preteen years, once the hormones start going or whatever, that I developed this obsession for women's underwear, women's panties. It was just super embarrassing. It was a super awkward time, right? When you're kind of discovering this stuff and the hormones are going crazy, and I just somehow developed this thing that I thought was a kink, and I don't know. I just felt really weird about the whole thing. And so my start was from this place of like, it's bad, it's a fetish, it's wrong, and I came across a book that my parents had stashed away. I don't know why I was snooping, but you do that as a kid when your parents are gone. And it was a hustler thing, and there was a story about a woman that had cross-dressed her husband, and they had this really hot lesbian sex night, And I thought for many, many years after that I was weird, and that kind of like sort of in a way made me this way. And then like fantasies like that just kept spiraling and getting bigger and all that kind of stuff about being cross-dressed, being forced to be feminine. And it wasn't until much, much later. I mean, we're talking just a few years ago, probably 5 years ago, where I finally started to work that backwards and realized that no, it wasn't that created this. It was my predisposition to that made those stories attractive to me. Mm-hmm. And then in talking with a therapist, I realized that, going back through all the different things of my life, that I had always bragged that I had a girlfriend every year of my life starting in preschool. I've been engaged 3 times, and one of those times was to the girl in preschool. Can you imagine coming home and telling your what your parents would think when your preschooler comes home and tells you that they're engaged? So my therapist pulled that out at one point. She's like, wait, why would a preschool age boy want a girlfriend? This is about the time we were kind of exploring the cross-dressing, the hints at the transgenderism. I don't even know if that's the appropriate term. Sorry if I've thrown something out that people revile against. Still new at this. But we were trying to kind of figure things out, and she pointed that out as one of those things. And when you trace it back, it really makes sense. I didn't outwardly understand that I felt like I was in the wrong body. I was just incredibly drawn to the other side. And so, and I was just too conscious that I was a boy, and I wasn't allowed to do any of these things. I didn't have the language for transgender or understand any of that. So I just wanted to be close to girls and be part of that world as much as I could. So I would have girlfriends. And, I just have other things like that. Hitting it off with a girl at a going away party for my parents or whatever. And she took me up to her room, totally innocent stuff. We were like 8. But just being enthralled to be in a girl's room and those things. Then recently I remembered I was in choir in 5th grade, and I was so excited, so happy to be a soprano. The choir teacher would remark about how well I could sing like the girls, and that just made me feel so wonderful inside. And again, it wasn't until 30 years later that I was able to put the pieces together and go like, oh yeah, because I thought I had developed this weird kink and this fetish from reading this porn stuff, and just kind of went down this dark rabbit hole. But when you realize that no, it was always there, and it's part of who I am, and that realization really kind of made it possible for me to come out and start to accept myself.
Beautiful. I think you so your second question is, when did you first realize you were trans?
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be interesting to, because you were engaged 3 times and you were married once, right?
Yes.
Do you want to talk about how this realization that you were different kind of influenced your marriage, and how that kind of carried through? Because you talked about how you felt so good, like going into a girl's bedroom. It's a totally different world, like living with a female partner, right? So do you want to maybe talk a little bit about what that was like for you, and how your trans journey factored into that?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the majority of my life, and definitely my trans journey, is fear-based. That's something that I still have to work on, and a lot of negativity. Like I said, for the longest time, and I mean, it was well into my marriage when I still thought of this as a fetish and a bad thing. It wasn't until like the very end that I started to realize, oh, this is a part of me that is something else and something bigger, and something just neutral, not good or bad. It's just, it is. Mm-hmm. So I spent the relationship with my high school sweetheart, afraid to tell her about these feelings of like wanting to buy and wear women's lingerie. And eventually I did, tentatively, and like the thought of like it would be cute if we had some stuff that matched. And we did go out and go shopping and get one pair of like boy short panties that were like kind of uncomfortable, and like I was so afraid still to go all in on it and really be open and honest about what I wanted there, that I backed way off of it. And then it was like kind of not a wonderful experience for either of us. She was sort of on board but didn't understand it. And of course the thing that a significant other asks first when you tell them about this is, do you want to be a woman? Well, there's 2. It's either, are you gay, or do you want to be a woman? And I was so far away from being able to say that. Eventually, the relationship ended for completely other reasons. And then I met the woman that would become my wife. We were dating for about a year and a half, had been living together for about 3 months when I finally brought it out. And at that point, it was a duffel bag of women's panties. And it was just one of the most terrifying experiences I've ever had in my life. This woman that I'm in love with, that was total honeymoon period, just head over heels. And I thought for sure this was going to end the relationship. It, in a way, it kind of went worse, like worst case scenario. So I told her, and she sort of laughed it off of like, oh, that's, you were worried about this? Like you were hiding this from me? Like it's kind of no big deal. Massive relief. I felt so good. I'm like, okay, so like we can deal with this. Okay, this is good. Then the next day there was just a big blow up. She wasn't talking to me. Well, she wasn't talking to me. And then there was a blow up. Obviously there can't be a blow up if she's not talking to me. And she was like, I don't know how you could hide this from me. There were trust issues. She's like, I don't know if I can handle this. I think that was when the question came up, do you want to be a woman? And all of that. And so I went from, let's see if I can keep this on the screen. I went from here to up here, everything's going to be great, to like, through the floor, and just felt terrible about it. And then, I'm a little foggy, but just that fear, that what that did to me inside, like really made it hard for me to talk about. And I did my damnedest to put it away and hide it, but then it would just, like, every once in a while I would have to get into the duffel bag, and I have to wear my clothes and hide them under things, and eventually it moved on, and I wanted bras, and then I was just, that was it for my comfort in the marriage. Like from then on, I was just terrified, because it went to bras, and then I wanted pants, like slacks or whatever that I could wear to work, and then I wanted more and more feminine things, and I just needed to express that feminine side without even really realizing that that's what it was. I just thought, again, that it's this fetish, and for some reason it's getting stronger, and I can control it less. Like, the more I tried to control it, the worse it got. The more of an obsession it became. And so, yeah, I was just trying to hide things as much as I could, and feeling like, oh, if now that I've got bras, like if she finds that, it's over. Oh, now that I've got this, like if she finds that, it's over. And so, it just fostered this complete lack of communication, just hiding things and not being true to myself, obviously. Still keeping it in that sphere of it's a bad thing, and so not only do I need to hide it, but it reflects negatively on me. It means that I'm a bad husband, I'm a bad person, because I'm this freaking weirdo, and I didn't really get out of that in the marriage. It wasn't until we separated for about a year, and part of that, in that separation, was for me to go and explore this and figure out what it was. And I don't know if we should get into that yet, or if you've got more questions on the other part.
Well, I think it's sad and ironic that part of the issue that seems to have sparked this was her identification of potential trust issues, right? Because you went from like full acceptance, like you said, like way up here, like super excited, like she accepts me for who I am, and I'm I'm in the throes of love, and this is amazing, down to like, how could you hide this from me? Don't you trust me? I think that's an incredibly painful place to receive from. And I suspect, not a therapist, but I suspect that that's maybe a safer place for her to come from if she can't understand what you're experiencing. It's easier to kind of deflect and say, oh, I have a problem with the fact that you hid that, not a problem with the fact that this is what you're doing. But then the sort of rejection that you got then actually led to actual trust issues, right?
Yeah.
I think probably anyone who's watching this can understand that, we show different parts of ourselves as we go through our relationships. And so it's not necessarily an overall trust issue, like I'm hiding things, but a safety place, right, that we come from, where as we get closer, we expose sort of deeper and deeper parts of ourselves. And you said this was about a few months into living together, and so I think that would be a natural place to do that. So, but how long were you married before you separated, and then once you separated to divorce? And I would say, so when I first met you, you described yourself as a cross-dresser, not as trans. And so let's talk a little bit about sort of like the time frame that we're talking about with regard to the marriage, and then maybe go into at what point did you sort of draw the line and say, it's not just me wanting to wear women's clothes once in a while, I actually identify as trans, and whatever that means to you, because I know that means different things to different people.
Yeah, so we were together about 4 years before we got married, and we were married for 7 before we separated. So we were right at about the 11-year mark when things went south. And like I said, you know, it's confusing to me that relationship is over in a lot of ways. Like, you know, I felt at the time that the trans issue was kind of a smaller part of it. There was the communication obviously is number one. That you can't have a long-term relationship without that level of communication. And I just I just grew to the point of where I felt like I couldn't share anything with her, and yet at the same time this was kind of growing in me and becoming more of a thing. So I hinted before where it just piles on this fear. When we did the down here, up here, down there, that just really solidified in me that I was at fault, I was wrong, and I had to put it all away. And it was before the separation where I came across one of the key things, or it was about the time the separation, maybe it was just happening, we had just separated, that I came across a forum that was the purge and how much it cost people. And it was a bunch of trans people discussing how they had all these female clothes, underwear, the whole thing, all these wonderful things, wigs, and the whole deal. But they had families, they had kids, they had wives that wouldn't accept it, and they knew that if they kept doing it, they would lose all of that, and so it wasn't worth it for them. They were putting that side of themselves away, and they were getting rid of all the clothes, donating it or throwing it away, and they're done with it, done. And then 6 months, a year, 2 years later, they all had to go and buy it back, and this was how much money that purge had cost them, because they just went and spent all that money back again. What that lit up in my brain is like, oh, okay, so I had a marriage and it was important to me, and I was afraid that I was losing it or going to lose it, but I didn't have kids. We didn't have that, like, I felt like the stakes weren't as high for them. I just had them on this pedestal. It's like, well, if they have all of this stuff to lose, and they feel like they're going to lose everything if they keep doing this, and yet they can't get rid of it, it's still part of them, then I have to look at myself as that as well, where this is a part of me. I'm not going to be able to get rid of it. I'm not going to be able to throw it away or hide it in the closet anymore. It's something I need to deal with. Mm-hmm. And that's when it started to be, well, this is part of me, and it started to shift slightly from bad, evil, deviant person to this is just part of me. Let's strip the labels and just like start to accept it. Now, what does life mean from this point? Mm-hmm. So yeah, when we separated, I went and got my own apartment and started to dress more and more, and get in all kinds of different clothes. And then I was starting to kind of slowly ease it into work, where it was, oh God, the purge and how much it cost you is one thing, but the thing that I did, I I understand it, but it seems so stupid in retrospect. I went and bought women's clothes 5, 6 sizes too big so that they fit like men's clothes. So that I could wear women's clothes, but they fit like guys' clothes and no one would know. And just, looking back at that, it's like it doesn't make any sense. And yet it makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. My therapist asked me at one point, well, why not just wear like pink men's shirts and get into floral or, more metrosexual, more kind of like androgynous? And I still at that point couldn't put a point on it, but she said that and it rung so hollow to me. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why the hell would I want to do that? And yet I had this thing where I'm wearing these women's clothes and they don't fit right, and yet it's still making me feel so much better. So it was just a really confusing and weird time. Then, eventually we just decided that the marriage wasn't going to work out. We had a really interesting conversation. I don't remember the rest of it. I just remember the 2 key points. My point, her counterpoint. I said, I feel like I never get to see you. And she said, I feel like you're always up my ass. And when we had that conversation, I'm like, wow, we could not be further apart. Mm-hmm. When she came home and I wanted to just run to the door and throw my arms around her and tell her I loved her, and she wanted nothing to do with me. She wanted her personal space and time to go take a shower and like ease into the night. We were just on such different pages for what we needed and wanted in a relationship. Love languages, all that stuff. But, it's like the point that you brought up of her potentially, psychoanalyzing here, totally unqualified, mm-hmm. but her inability or unwillingness to kind of deal with that, the transgender implications to that, suggests that there was more to it than that. Maybe the fact that I was hiding things, maybe that was obvious. Mm-hmm. Or more obvious than I would like to know.
And I don't think people like to think of themselves as not particularly open-minded or not welcoming. So it may have been a safer place for her to go to say, oh, it's a trust issue, as opposed to I inherently don't know how to handle this mm-hmm. kind of situation. I think it might be interesting also. I know that you've kind of come into this community and into this level of acceptance a little later than some people, a little more recently. Mm-hmm. So I think it might be helpful to frame, I know my lighting's going crazy, I'm sorry. It might be helpful to frame some of this in terms of the time period in which this is happening too. Okay. Because I think that people kind of like finding themselves in this way now, like if someone were to initiate this sort of journey or sort of come to this inner realization today, they would have a very different experience in the world, and I think with a level of acceptance than they did years ago. So I think, can you maybe capture sort of the general time frame in which this is occurring, like with your marriage and then sort of your own journey?
Yeah, more global timeline. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was late 30s.
We don't have to share ages. We don't ask people's ages, Emily.
No, I think that's part of it. I was late 30s when we separated and eventually got divorced, and it took me probably 3 years after that, another relationship that ended because of the cross-dressing, to finally realize and come out as trans. And so that was just a handful of years ago. So mm-hmm. like societal issues and acceptance were never part of it. I know that I came out at the right time to be more accepted and accepted at work and things like that, but that was just pure happenstance because of how long it took me to get over that hurdle of thinking that I was just this weird deviant person, and realize that this is a part of me that's neutral. So, mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. So, like I said, it was just a handful of years ago. I think the marriage was over. About 6 years now. I am so thankful that I've lost track of time on that. I really have no idea. The other really big thing that helped in my journey of acceptance was finding that girlfriend after the marriage. It took me a while to kind of get to be ready, but I went and I met somebody on one of the dating sites. We had a few dates, and date 2, I think already I was really worried. I was like, I gotta tell her this, because by then I was cross-dressing a lot, and it was, I was at least out to a few friends at work. There were some people that had seen makeup and some other things, and they were like, hey, and I'm like, yeah. So I was already starting to build up the network, which was amazing. And it was great because they came to me. That was the thing that sort of blew my mind. They came out of the woodwork, and I had, I think, at least 3 solid people at work that were just like total champions behind me. But I met this girl, and I was sweating bullets right from the start because I liked her right from go. And I'm like, okay, I need to tell her this, because I don't want to have that situation again, that months in, oh, you lied to me or whatever. But I still was dealing with it. I had about a year to explore it, and had some mixed reactions and mixed results. But now here I'm telling this girl, and it was the 3rd date, and she was just like, I can't handle that. I can't deal with that. And we kept talking. She's like, we could just be friends, and I'm like, okay. And then we kept hanging out, and I really opened up to her one night, and it was, I don't know, I was talking about being, the feelings I'd had of self-hatred and thoughts of suicide and things like that, and I actually started crying, and I think that was the moment she fell in love with me, honestly, because she really changed towards me after that, and I guess that's typical in dating. Guys aren't really open and honest and sharing their feelings, especially not that early in a friendship relationship. So I thought we talked about it, and I said, well, I've had this year to explore it, and I don't have the self-hatred about it anymore. Maybe I can put it away and just live vicariously through you. I have this thing for lingerie and pretty girly things. You're pretty girly yourself, so like I can buy you things, and we can be fine. That was good for 6 or 8 months, and then we took a trip to San Francisco, and I wanted to go so badly to go get my nails done and to go shopping. And there'd been a couple times before this where I brought up, I really want to paint my nails. What do you think about that? And she's like, oh, I can't. And the big thing with her was she didn't want her daughter to know. Her daughter was, kind of a tween, and I don't fault her for it at all. I don't want to come across as that at all. But she didn't want her daughter to know, and there was a part of me that was like, well, even if I do put this away and I don't do it again much, or I guess if it wasn't at all, then it wouldn't be a big deal. But like, I felt that it was a part of me, and like, if she's part of my family, I would want to be honest with her about that as well. And so that really kind of rung in a way that's like, well, I just don't think that this family dynamic is going to work for me then. And so I broke up with her, and just had to have the moment of realization that, like, if I can split up with somebody that I'm absolutely head over heels in love with, that's in love with me, because I feel like I have to be myself, then damn it, I have to be myself. I have to stop with the BS and quit hiding, quit hating, and just go with it. So then came the big thing. I took the next year, and I highly recommend this to any trans people out there. This is one of my big things of advice. Once you come to this realization that you're trans, or you might be, or even if it's just like you're a crossdresser, I took the year off. I told myself, you've got a year, no questions. I'm not looking for answers. I'm just going to do what I feel feels good. And if I want to wear a skirt in the morning, I'm going to wear a skirt in the morning, and I'm going to go with it. I'm just going to do what feels right, and I'm not going to worry about what it means, or try not to worry about what people think. But yeah, the main thing was internally. I'm not going to try and ask myself questions. Well, what does this mean? What am I going to this or don't worry about it. Just do it. And like I said, I gave myself just about a full year to do that and really explored it. And so it was shortly thereafter that I wore a skirt to work for the first time. And another one of those days where I'm driving into work, I'm wearing a skirt and a cute little top. Some people knew some things because, my clothes had been a little bit more androgynous, some makeup, some eyeliner here and there, but I think I got my ears double pierced. So there were clues, but showing up at work was just a bam. Hello, here I am. And I'm driving into work going, what the hell am I doing? What am I doing? I have to go back home. Like, what am I doing? I'm going to lose my job. No one's going to talk to me. Just this crazy explosion of anxiety. And then I had that same thought of like, no. And I talked to myself in the third person for I think one of the first times. We got up this morning and we decided that we were going to wear this. This is what we wanted to wear. And it felt really good to put this on. We have to honor that. Like, we have to have our own back because no one else in this world is obligated to. So regardless, like, we have to stand behind ourselves. I made this decision. This is what I wanted to do in the morning. I'm freaking out now, but I have to honor those initial feelings and just go with it. And I stuffed it down, got rid of as much of the anxiety as I could, and I went in there with my head held high. And
how did it go?
Pretty instantly, I got emails, and I got a lot of great support, and from people that I thought were kind of like guys, the ones that you're most afraid of, the ones you play sports with, and you have all the guy conversations. You're like, oh boy, like, I'm really worried about what this person's gonna think, and oh my God, they're not gonna talk to me, or and like I said, I got a lot of words of encouragement, and straight from the beginning, and I was really surprised to hear this because like I said, I was fighting to get over the thought of it being negative. Mm-hmm. And people were messaging me saying, "Oh my God, you're so brave! Like, I'm so inspired by your courage," and I'm like, "Wait, could this actually be a positive thing?" Like, it sort of broke a part of my brain because I'm like, that was so far from a possibility to me. I hope I didn't let it go to my head. I mean, I have my own show where I'm trying to do more of that now, but like, that was where I started to realize that like, oh, like, this might actually help people. This might inspire or like I said, just have some kind of positive outcome to it. And that was so far from anything that I'd had in as a potential thought before. And, just off to the races then.
Great. Do you think that in that external dialogue coming at you, change your internal dialogue too?
Yeah.
To try to like transform that from sort of like, maybe this is a negative thing that I'm struggling with and people are not going to accept me, to all of this acceptance that you're getting all of a sudden, try to change that internal dialogue.
Yeah, and like I said, that was the single biggest thing, because what I was fighting to do is just to try to get to a neutral place. Like, I'm like, it's this negative, horrible side of me, and no, we're not thinking that anymore. It's just a part of me, and we're going. And then to hear people like, oh, you're courageous, and you're, getting compliments on like my makeup, and like, you look so pretty and things like that. It's like, I love that you're saying this, and you can't imagine how it's making me feel inside. I feel elated. I'm 10 feet off the ground, but I couldn't have imagined that being a possibility up until the point that I heard it from people. So It's not like I was seeking external validation, but my God, did I need that?
It's funny how much external support and really those sort of belief mirrors can really help us with our internal struggles. So we have a few questions in the chat. I don't know if you were worried about that, so I will. I'll address a couple of these questions.
My biggest fear in this show is crickets. That nobody's going to watch, nobody's going to care. So if people are drilling in hard-hitting questions and stuff, that is amazing. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple of questions. So it's not the first question. So I don't want that person to think that I'm ignoring them. I will get to that. This question seems like it fits very well in what we're talking about now, which is sort of like coming out at work and really like embracing and being authentic. So Petru says, tough question for Emily, but with her being out in the public for so long and only recently biting the HRT bullet, does she feel more or less prepared than a lot of other girls that just kind of stay closeted and jump into the deep end rather than wade in slowly? Because for you, it's been this whole very like long progressive journey, and you're sort of only now kind of like dipping into those deeper waters, whereas girls that their journeys are comparatively shorter and they're starting now maybe just jump right in. Do you feel more or less prepared?
Prepared is an interesting word. I'm having a hard time kind of wrapping my brain around that, but here's where I'll take it. Like I said, it's been about fear and self-loathing the entire time. So it took me so long to get to that level of acceptance and all that. But then I've been so afraid of every step. That first time I went shopping, I was terrified to I always tell people this. The Mervyn store was my main store. But all the department stores, the aisleways are linoleum because that's the high traffic, and then the carpeted areas are where the racks are. I could not get myself to go into the carpet areas. I was terrified, hot lava floor of the carpet areas. So I would do these like weird flybys and be like, "Oh, that's kind of cute," and then I would come back a few minutes later and like rifle through and maybe grab something, and it's like, "Oh, it's not my size, damn it," and keep going. And then I would have to like, okay, and I would come back to another rack. But like I said, I wouldn't go to the interior. And that's just kind of a good explanation for like how every step has been. I've been just terrified of each one. The weird thing that I just realized recently is that I judge myself against other trans women pretty harshly. I think we all do. I tell people on here nonstop not to do that, but that's of course because we're all hypocrites and we say monkeys or do as I say, not as I do. What I just freaking recently, maybe last week, realized is exactly what you are alluding to. These women, when they realize they're trans, they start HRT right away. They don't wait 3-5 years. And I've been trying to perfect makeup. I've kind of given up on hair for some reason. I need to get back into hair. But I'm still judging myself. I'm like, I'm not feminine enough because these other girls look so much more feminine and all this, and like they're getting it better and all that. And I realized that HRT really does a lot of that for the feminization of the facial structure and the musculature. Because I still have these big shoulders and arms. I mean, where is it? Okay, no, this way. I mean, just super unfeminine aspects of myself that I'm judging myself against these women. And yeah, it's all because of that, because I waited so long to start HRT, but I'm full on in the community. And so I feel like I'm part of this and should look like these other women. And yeah, it's just because I took a long time to get on there. And now I'm just super impatient. I'm about a month in and I'm like, where are the changes? And like, what's going on? I'm still not feeling anything. A guest I interviewed recently said after 3 weeks, she already felt so much better about herself. And last week was one of the worst weeks I've had in a long time. Like I was just like really depressed, and I still feel the tails of it this week, where it's really hard to get motivated and get stuff done because I don't know, I have this anxiety and fear and like the kind of what's the point sort of perspective. So I'm hoping it helps, and that realization is going to help me a bit. And yeah, I'm just waiting for the effects to take hold, and then just see what the next step is, to see if surgery's in my future, to see how at mid 40s my body takes to hormones. Like, here we go through puberty again. That'll be fun and a great emotional roller coaster. But is my body too old to really change significantly? We shall see.
Well, it'll be an adventure, and the rolls of highs and lows of hormones are not fun, regardless of what kind of a life you're living. We have a couple of questions. I do want to address your do as I say, not as I do. I like to think of that a little differently. I like to think of it as more of a please don't make the mistakes I'm making for myself. You know,
very wise.
like,
Yes,
I'm being a little hypocritical, but like, please don't put yourself through that.
it's not a good place to be.
All right. Jane and Gail says, before discovery of your transness, this is jumping back a little bit, but I don't want to lose her questions in the question. Before discovery of your transness, did you ever have long-term goals? I'm going to follow that with sort of a separate. If so, how did those goals change or not change as you kind of embraced yourself along this journey?
Like transition goals of like what I want to be as a woman, or just general life goals?
It sounds like general life goals.
I don't feel that those have really shifted that much. I did really want kids. And again, just, I mean, we couldn't communicate, but we started the relationship off. She didn't want to have kids. She was not against it. She was more afraid of it and was not interested. So I had to make the choice in moving forward in asking her to marry me. I'm like, okay, this, and that's sort of why it took so long. That's why we were together for 4 years before was coming up to that realization of like, I love her so much that I'm choosing a family with her and whatever that is versus the family with kids. Kind of a sidebar. One of the things that I talk about goals. Again, one of the breadcrumbs that eventually made me realize, oh yeah, I really am a valid trans person, is I was always insanely jealous of women that were pregnant. I thought it was beautiful and magical, and I was so jealous that I could not be pregnant. So not only did I want kids, like I wanted to have kids. I don't feel that anything in my life really shifted. I'm a graphic and web designer, an artist. I love to draw and just do, creative things. Hence why, like, I've got all these ridiculous little side projects. This right above my finger is a little R2 unit from Disneyland that I painted and weathered. That's Ellie. And now I'm doing that on the side, selling those. Just anything that's got any kind of creativity, designing the paint schemes and then painting them and doing it all up. Any of that kind of stuff I love to do. And I feel that that's completely separate from being trans. That's another thing that's a core part of myself that I couldn't change if I wanted to. And since I was just a little kid, I loved drawing, and I knew I wanted that to somehow be what I wanted, what I did in my goals in my career. And so luckily I found graphic design, and I've always been in a creative field since then.
Do you feel like that brought you in a community of people that were maybe a little bit more likely to be welcoming for your journey, sort of as you started to go into work, wearing more makeup and wearing more feminine clothes, then eventually wearing a skirt to work, which sounds like this absolutely pivotal moment in sort of your journey? Do you feel like being in a creative role and being in a creative environment really helped you be in a community of people that were maybe a little bit more like open-minded and welcoming?
That would be the hope. That would be what you would think and would hope would be the case. Unfortunately, most of my creative jobs have been in corporations. So they were more corporate offices that with a graphic design department. So it's always been that kind of more corporate slant to it. So the people I worked with were directly, a lot of times in our little small groups, were supportive and, more open-minded, kind of like what you're alluding to. But for the most part, I had just as many friends in the company that were not creative research people and people that, no disrespect, but they kind of come across as like more stodgy, more traditional and conservative. Mm-hmm. But I do, I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome. I really do. And now I'm thinking about it. One of the things that I realized when I was in high school and was like, okay, I love to draw. How am I going to make this into a career? And I saw the fine artists, the ones that were really good at like the fine art stuff that, you think would eventually be an artist and would make money selling paintings and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm not that weird. I didn't have the creative the creativity that they had that was so far out of the box. Like I felt mine was just kind of super basic. And so because of that, like I really shied away from that field, the fine art field, because I felt like an imposter, like I couldn't hack it. And now as I'm doing this and I'm having these feelings about being trans and not being trans enough or not being feminine enough, I'm realizing that looking back that was kind of bullshit, and that that would have been a great community to be in. The stoners and artists and all that kind of stuff, just free love, open, less restrictive. And I went down this path of corporate structure and rules, and no, this is deviant behavior and you can't do that, and all of this, and that's been the overall framework for my life and my mindset. And so this does actually kind of get back to that question of goals in a way. I met what I set for myself as a goal, but it's not probably where I should have gone.
Interesting. But I like to take a negative and turn it into a positive, or take a challenge and turn it into a positive. And the beauty is that now that you have this unique experience through this medium, you can share that with other people that maybe have similar experiences, because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us are as alone as we think we are. Mm-hmm. We're all kind of islands unto ourselves. So Petrus has another question.
I just want to say really quick that you just absolutely did a perfect PSA for this show. That's exactly the point of this show. What I found, and what really gave me the impetus of starting this, is that no matter how similar the stories are, every time I hear another trans person talk about their story, there's something that resonates with me in a new way and makes me feel better about myself and my story. And like you said, less like an island, more included. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. I just hope that there's something in this that resonates with our audience. That's something that you see that goes, oh yeah, like I totally feel that way, and I totally did that. I was totally afraid of that thing, and it is silly, and I'm glad I'm not alone.
Okay, so this actually is a perfect transition into Petrus's next question. She says, why did you get into Twitch and streaming and taking a visible stand in the trans community?
I joined Toastmasters, actually extremely reluctantly. My company had Toastmasters, a club there, and it was big for a long time. There was always the flyers up, and I'm like, yeah, screw that. Just get up in front of people, public speaking, no. Hell no. No interest. When I came out and I was, wearing skirts at work and stuff and all of this, and I was getting these messages from people, I'm like, I have something to talk about. I have something to say now that I never felt like, that was what I was afraid of, the public speaking aspect of it, but I was also like, who the hell cares about what I have to say? And I got bugged by somebody incessantly in Toastmasters at just that right moment when I was coming to the realization of like, maybe I have something to say and something to share. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, what the hell, what do I have to lose? And then it turned out that I had to lose $50 to get into to be part of the club, and it's just like, okay, whatever, I'm making enough money, it's fine. And they were my friends, there were enough of my friends in there, and so it was good, terrifying, but I was at this stage in my life where like I'm turning against these fears, I'm fighting them, and I'm trying to overcome them, and one of the biggest was public speaking. So what the hell? Well, then I started to realize, like, okay, this is a forum for me. Like, I'm learning these skills and I can use them. What am I going to say, and what am I going to do? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to be Tony Robbins. That's that's not where I'm going. I just could see that wasn't a goal, that wasn't a future. But I'm like, I want to do something with this. And the deeper I got into Toastmasters, the more I felt that, but the less clear it was for me actually of how I was going to do it, where I was going to find my audience and the format. So about the start of sort of about the end of last year, it started to dawn on me of like, I haven't been active in a trans community in a long time. I started in one going back during the separation, when we were separated. That about year time there, I joined a transgender meetup group because they had cross-dressing in their keywords, and I'm like, okay, sure. Same story. Felt like a complete fraud. I'm going there and I'm dressed up, but I'm like, these people are going to see right through me. They're going to see that I'm a total fake because I'm just a cross-dresser and these are actual trans people, and they're going to completely shun me, and they're going to be pissed that I'm there because I'm a complete fake. Lo and behold, the exact opposite. It was the complete range. There were people who dressed up with a little bit of stubble, men's clothes, gave a men's name, and there were people that were dressed to the nines, with corset or whatever, girdles on underneath to give the shape, and the pads and the full makeup and the hair. So it was everything. Great. Okay. However, hanging out with them, I was still dealing with so much internally, trying to figure out myself, that I think it was too much for me. I think it was too much too soon. And so eventually I kind of fell out of that group and just stopped going. And then, yeah, I just kind of avoided it for a long time. So like I said, it wasn't until about a year ago now that I finally realized, like, I need to do that again. I need to find the trans community, find the support and all of that. So I started following trans women on Instagram. And one of them, at the beginning of this year, I think it was about March, right as the pandemic was happening and we were getting into lockdown, she said she did a live Instagram video. And I, at that point, had never really watched them. I just ignored that thing. And she said, I'm going live on Twitch. Okay, whatever. Went and checked out Twitch. And one of the shows that she is on, or was on at the time, is the Transvengers. This wonderful, they have 4 people in it, and they do a Q&A. They answer your questions. And I loved the fact of being able to do a live show and to be able to share your story, and that there was the chat so that people can come and watch live and interact and ask questions. And I'm like, I found my format. What the hell do I want to do? But I found my format. And then just in watching that show and in talking to other people, I came to that realization of, like, it doesn't matter how basic it is. I feel like this show is super basic. Like, anybody could do it. It's, whatever. But I just went forward with it because I'm like, it doesn't matter. Every story I hear has something that helps me. And that's important. And I want to do that. And so I'm like, okay, here we go.
Absolutely. But I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown, but she has this idea of radical vulnerability, which I believe really strongly in. Mm-hmm. And it's basically this principle that once you open up and you allow yourself to be vulnerable and you find the courage to be able to do that, it actually gives other people that courage to be able to kind of open up a little bit more themselves. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think programs like this are so strong. Because you sharing your story and all of your guests sharing their stories, not only does it give people something to resonate with, but it maybe gives them the strength and the courage to be able to share their own stories. Mm-hmm. So you
That's
have
good. We always need more guests. Always need more guests.
You have a ton of questions. People are very curious about your story. So I don't know how much you want to stick to your kind of core set of questions or address the questions in the chat.
I ask those questions every week, so I'm bored of them. Let's do it. Let's flip it. Let's flip it on its head from what I talked about before the show. Let's answer all of the questions from the chat. Mm-hmm. And then if it ties in, or if one of the standard questions kind of adds on to that, then you can kind of, piece those together.
Perfect. I'm trying to fit them together so that it makes sense in a story. So
it's a fun challenge to do live, isn't it?
No, it's great. So a lot of these fit very closely into what we're talking about, which is beautiful. So So you talked about the Transvengers. So obviously this is like another kind of pivotal thing for you to find, and Twitch, which addressed how you kind of came to where you are creating your own show and getting on Twitch. P-Truth asks, do you have any role models in the transgender community? It sounds like the Transvengers are part of that, but do you have any other role models? And I personally would add to that question, what in particular do you find really, I don't want to say appealing, but draws you to these people the most?
The big thing that really excites me is someone, especially the more similar the story they have, like the older they are when they started transitioning and things like that, and the more beautiful they are as women. That's the more that makes me like the most excited, and gives the most inspiration, because I just, again, the negativity in the back of my head, you're never going to be feminine enough, you're never going to look good enough or whatever, you're never going to like who's in the mirror. And so the women that have gone through it and had the same kind of either late or kind of tough circumstances or whatever, and they've made it, and they've got these, and we're looking at Instagram and social media, so it's all there's a layer of BS on top of it where it's a little filtered, a little perfect, but there's just so much hope in that. And the idea of not being forced to dress as a woman, but like being, like I said, it started as being forced, but like to be able to become a woman completely has just always resonated so deeply with me in a way that I couldn't understand. And so when I see people that are able to do that and get to that level, I'm just like, wow, like it's possible, and I get so excited, and I want to see more of that. But then there's some people, honestly, that that it really intimidate me. One of the Transvengers really does, and a big person in the circle as well. Trying to decide if I should name names, or because it's just basically like they've gotten to a level of being so perfect, so much of hitting the ideal, that I'm like, it turns the opposite of like, well, okay, yeah, whatever. There's no way I could get to that. So like it starts to kind of like, go over that edge, and starts to kind of, I don't want to use this word, but turn me off in a way, because like it's that intimidation of like, oh yeah, that like I don't want to cling to that as a goal, because I already know there's no chance. And that does the opposite. That makes me feel kind of bad, like, if I'd only started sooner, or if I had a better bone structure or whatever. I hate my nose.
I think your nose is beautiful.
But just also, all those things.
Your nails, I know like the nail salons are closed right now, but I want everyone to know like Emily's nails are always like 300% better than mine. So whenever we meet at the tiki bar, I'm like, she's always put together and her nails are way better than mine.
I gotta make sure to hide my hands. They're in terrible shape right now. I have been projecting, so they've been breaking like crazy. So, there is that. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. There's so much of who you are and who you've spent so much of your life building this persona and being this person or whatever. And I'm a big DIYer. I love projects. I love getting out a hammer and beating on stuff and destroying my bathroom and redoing it. It's the 7-month project, but whatever. And so like that's just always gonna be a part of me. And like as soon as my nails get good, then I start a project and I break them all.
I'm sure that some of these people that you sort of assign is like, oh, that's an unattainable goal if I set my sights there. I'm sure that if as they share their stories of how they got to where they were, and their stories of acceptance and their stories of transition, I'm sure that's like helpful in framing your own story, and maybe that's not unattainable. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's that idea of unattainability is a story that can resonate with everyone for different reasons.
True.
You know, like if only I got into my career earlier, or if I only, you know, found my calling in life earlier, or if I was only more authentic earlier and went down this path. But, you know, it's not as much about the destination as about the journey, right? Because we are all islands. You don't really know what's going on in that person's head, and they're probably finding somebody else to kind of idolize and say, oh, well, I'll never be as good as that other person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think these stories are stories that can resonate with all of us. So Peach-Roof is blowing up the chat with questions.
Yeah, of course she is.
So it's awesome. It's amazing. So I'm just gonna kind of make my way down. So one question is, with regard to, you talked about wanting to have kids, and you talked about then kind of adapting that goal to just sort of wanting to have a family. And I know we talked about a friend of mine who is trans and had frozen her sperm and then ultimately was able to have children with her partner. Peach-Roof asks, have you considered freezing your sperm for possible impregnation later? She says, I'm assuming she. So
yes.
apologize if that's not right. I have a friend who had gotten her partner pregnant after 11 months on HRT, but that's a rare case.
Mm-hmm.
So have you considered that's something that you would like to do? And I would say, why or why not?
That's one that I'm sheepish to admit. When I finally decided, yes, I'm going to do HRT, that was one of the first thoughts of like, I need to go visit a fertility clinic and freeze the sperm so that we have that as an option. I want to say two main things, but I don't want to get too distracted on things and forget my other point. When it came down to it, it started to be a block for me. I had no interest in going and actually doing the process. Going to a place, a doctor's office, to do that sounded as unappealing as anything in my life ever has. I will go to a surgeon 4 times to get something removed before I will go and do that. So I don't know. It just seems wrong in my brain. But I wanted to do that before starting HRT. I'm like, I just have to do it. I have to suck it up and do it. And I couldn't get myself to make that appointment. I still had it in the back of my head. I don't want to do this and whatever. And I was using lots of excuses to push off the HRT. And at some point I realized again, just piles of negativity in my brain. I'm having a hard time finding somebody. I have a hard time believing, and I always have, and that was a big part of the marriage, that if I am, my true self, open and painfully honest, no one's going to want me. And that factored into the final decision too of well, what's the point of freezing my sperm? No one's going to want to have kids with me anyways. I'll be lucky to find somebody and have a relationship and all of that. But the idea of them then also wanting to have kids and I'm too old and all this other stuff, just a really bad circle of negativity. So, but it was just this internal struggle. And I just finally made the decision of it's so important for me to start on HRT that I can't have this hold me back. And I was holding on to hope that I would eventually go and do that. But like I said, I just don't know how likely it is that I will actually go through with it. Very, very. It sounds very sad to say
that. You said this evening. So no one has a crystal ball, and dating in the time of COVID is harder than even dating in the time of not COVID. And I know you and I have had very lengthy conversations about the relative challenges of dating, particularly in a relatively small city.
Mm-hmm. And I get that a lot of it is I prefer to talk to somebody in person. I am okay on text or email or basically all of online dating. I'm okay with that. but I'm so much more me and comfortable and everything when I'm in person. Like I feel like I can read people and I can know if like a joke is going well or if a certain like type of conversation is working. Whereas when it's text, like I just feel I'm just shooting out into the ether and I have no idea what's working, what's not, and it kind of makes me uncomfortable, and it just seems so difficult to me. Whereas like if I could just meet them in person, that's great. As you just said, we live in a suburb I do. You left me. But I don't know. I would say I guess it is a fairly conservative suburban city, and it's kind of small. We have one gay bar and one tiki bar, thankfully. But it's been the experience of talking to women and having a good conversation and getting a number, and it's great. And hey, let's go hang out here or whatever. And talking to them early on, get them set down and all that and everything. And something comes up and they're like, oh no, this is not a date. No, I just want to be friends. Like I'm not interested in you that way. It's like, and it's just that's that same story over and over again where I feel like there's a vibe, we get along well, this is great, like I get the number, it's like, oh, it's all good. And so I haven't had any success as a trans person, and it's unfortunately feeding that narrative of like I'm having the trouble because I'm trans, and the fact of the matter is I am trans. Like that's something I can't get away from, but people aren't interested in dating that side of me. So maintaining the male aspects, with the freezing the sperm and all of that, like it's this really mixed emotions thing. Is it because I'm trans, because I'm like literal trans, like I'm in the transition, that's the problem? That if I was all guy or all girl, like it would be fine, and it's just this weird awkward period that's the problem? Or my brain loves to just jump to, well, it's just you.
Well, I encourage you to reframe that as it's not you, it's them.
Okay.
Because a lot of times rejection, because one would perceive that as rejection, right?
Mm-hmm.
You feel rejected for who you are, is more about them and their sensibilities and not any reflection on you or
it's
like
just
how you are.
Mm-hmm. It's just so hard and it's so hurtful because it's like, they kind of recoil against it a little bit strongly, and it's just like, really, it's like we're not, like we've been vibing, and like you came out with a stranger like on what should clearly kind of be a date, or if nothing else, like it's sort of an intimate thing. Like if you're willing to do that, like why wouldn't you just be willing to like, oh well, we can kind of try or keep it going for a little bit or whatever. But like the hard no, it's just that's where where it really feels like a rejection of like, it's not worth it to me to even entertain the idea. It's just a hard no.
This is another one of those stories that I think everyone everywhere can resonate with. Because if it's not that you're trans, that you're telling yourself like, oh, it's because I'm trans, it's everyone has this story for some sort of negative thoughts inside them. Like wherever their biggest insecurity is, that's probably where they're like, well, did I come on too hard? Did I not come on hard enough? Like, is it because I'm not successful enough? Is it because I'm too successful and they're intimidated? Is it because, I don't know, who knows? Like everyone has this story, I think, that they can resonate with. So I think this is absolutely something that everyone can identify.
That is the biggest thing the biggest, hardest thing for me in phrasing, in dating is that too much? Is that not enough? If I write one of those, that's why dating sites and stuff like that, and messaging instead of a conversation, like in the conversation, I can feel like where I feel like I can kind of toe where that line is at. Where's too much? Where's not? Whatever. But when it's a message, I rewrite the message 7 freaking times because I'm like, oh no, that's too much, and then it, ends up not enough. I just did that recently with a girl that I have a massive crush on, and I'm not even sure that she's aware I hit on her, because like by the end I'd like backed off it so much. Oh, it's too much. So it's.
But remember, I encourage you in those moments to remember wearing a skirt the first time to work and thinking, no, you know what? This is me. This is where I'm at. And what's going to happen is going to happen.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah. This is what I wanted to write. So let's put it out there and see what happens.
If she likes it, cool. She likes me for me. And if not, I'm always going to wonder. So I think you'll be a little flattered by this question from Peach Ruth. Because like I said, she's blown up the chat. She says, forgive the term, but passing privilege is a thing in the trans community. Do you feel there's less hardships for you that you're not as visible as a trans woman than many others? Would you ever give up the fight and representation for those others down the road when you are unclockable?
This is one of the biggest questions that I ask for the women that I feel are unclockable. And I've never thought of it for myself. Again, I don't know that I've considered it a possibility strongly. And again, like I said, like I alluded to earlier, it kind of comes from the fact that I waited so long to start HRT, but I'm still judging myself against these people that have been doing it. I am in no way unclockable. You have to be so far to a point to be to reach that, and I am very, very far away from that. Even when I feel at my best and my most feminine, and I'm just out there killing it, there, I can see all the people that know. It's just instant, and I get it, and it kind of knocks me off. I get on a little bit of a pedestal of like, oh, I feel good. I feel feminine tonight, and I'm killing it or whatever, and then it's just like, nope, dude in a dress. So I don't feel that I'm anywhere near there. I would not step back entirely, but I would revel in the moments when I could. Those places where I was thinking about it recently, and it's just like, oh my God, it would be so wonderful to join a total woman gym, and to be able, after surgery or whatever, and be completely passing and go and do that, and just truly be a woman in the most absolutely pure woman spot possible, in a gym where it's only women, and you're possibly naked or partially naked or whatever, and there's no clocking, there's nothing, you are just one of them. And I would absolutely dive headfirst into that and revel in it. I would really like to think that I'm not hypocritical, and that I would not disappear from the trans community, that I would still keep in mind how important it is to continue to have that visibility, for that same thing that I was talking about before, of that role model of like, oh, it's possible. I can get there. I can get to the place where I'm unclockable and can just be a woman. I don't think I need that full time for me, that I think I could still have this show and do these sorts of things. But I would love those moments when I can just be a chameleon and just blend in and disappear and just be any other woman in a crowd.
Mm-hmm. It's that external validation,
mm-hmm.
right? That's quieting those internal voices.
Yeah, just that getting to that point of like, I'm no longer trans. I'm just a woman. Nobody thinks anything other about it. Like, to finally be there, to cross that finish line would just be the ultimate. And yeah, that would just be wonderful. It's great because, again, like you said, the level of acceptance we have now at this time in history is wonderful. And I'll go out and I will get Miss and Ma'am, and people gladly call me Emily and things like that. And it just it feels so wonderful. But then there's those moments where it's just like, oh nope, still have the masculine features, still don't pass, still have the beard shadow that no matter how much I try, I can't cover. It knocks a peg out from under you a little bit.
It's not showing now, for whatever that's worth.
Good. Yeah, it was a double coat today, because I did the first coat. I'm like, oh, you still can't tell. And see, I can totally see it. It might as well be a full beard right now for me.
So lots of questions in the chat. This question is serious, though. It says, any advice for folks that are starting out as cross-dressing or questioning that they'll tip the scales to maybe let them see their authentic selves? So I think it's really getting towards like, what kind of tips do you have for people that are maybe starting on their journey to really help them really embrace their authentic selves and not kind of put themselves in these kind of like boxes?
Yeah, that really goes back to that key thing I said earlier is once you've come to the realization that this is something that you're going to do, then just accept it and give yourself a pass. Don't try to overthink it. Don't try to overdefine it. Just do what feels right. Have those days where you go out to the mall or a restaurant or whatever in a full dress, makeup, wig or whatever with the hair, earrings, and the whole deal. And then the next week be terrified or unwilling to do that. Like, it's going to ebb and flow, especially at first. Don't try to define things too harshly or strongly or put yourself in any boxes. Allow it to be a process and to try different things. And like I said, the doing that and giving myself a year to not answer any questions really freed me up to try new things that I don't think I would have been able to otherwise, and helped me to realize that, like, it's okay this week to feel like I want to be super girly, and like next week, like, kind of reject it and be like, no, that was too much. I can't deal with that this week. I kind of want to hide again. I want to slip back into society and just be, unclockable. And the only way I can do that is in my male clothes. I'm sure you, Andy, saw me plenty of times in male clothes with, unshaven and using my old name, because those days I just couldn't, deal with going through the whole thing. Getting off topic, but give yourself a pass. Accept that this is going to be part of you, and just back off of trying to define it or hinder yourself in any way. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to put on too much makeup. You're going to maybe make other people uncomfortable. Like, maybe you go into the women's restroom and you're just not comfortable, so you're going to make them uncomfortable. Like, there are going to be missteps. There are going to be mistakes. You're going to do them. Accept that it's a process, and give yourself the pass.
I think that's great advice for anyone. We all have days in which we feel like we're on top of the world and we're super confident, and maybe we're taking down a peg, and other days where we just start off not feeling good, not feeling. Hey, sorry, my cat just attacked me.
Drive-by catting.
Yeah, he's just like, you're not paying enough attention to me. Where we're just like not feeling it, and maybe something changes that, or maybe we go through the whole day that way, and that's okay too.
And that's been kind of funny, again, not being on HRT, because I was surprised on those days when I would wake up and I actually see Emily in the mirror. There are the times when, like, I'm going to go out with the girls and I get all dressed up and I put all the makeup on or whatever, and it's just like, okay, this is how I want to look. I love it. There we go. And I introduce myself as Emily or whatever. But there are times, even pre-HRT, where I look in the mirror and I see Emily. I actually see her. Like, I don't see the guy there. And then, of course, unfortunately, the opposite is true, where there are times when I have all the makeup on and I just still see a guy. But the scale has shifted, and it's more often than not that even 2 days unshaven, tired as hell in the morning, and I just look like a train wreck, I still see Emily. And that's such a wonderful feeling to have. It's great to get there.
Do you feel like that's a result of the HRT, or do you feel like that's a result of being more authentic inside yourself and really embracing that and not succumbing to the negative contrarian voices as much?
Mm-hmm. It's completely unrelated to HRT. It's before that, and I believe it is acceptance of saying, okay, I am a woman. Like, that is what's inside of me and what's trying to come out. Like, that is there. And sometimes, like, she's looking back at me in the mirror and it's like, there you are. Like, oh my God. Like, yes, this is the way it should have been, like all of these years. And I didn't realize it, that when I was 8, like this is what I should have seen with better skin and all of that. But you know, this is what I've been missing. Like, where have you been?
I'm getting flashes to Hook. Have you seen the movie Hook, where
Uh-huh.
they're looking at Robin Williams, and then they're like pulling his face left and right, and then all of a sudden one of them is like, "There you are, Peter," you know, and then all the kids can see. This is what I'm having flashes to inside yourself. And
Yeah.
we all have moments like that, right, where we feel most ourselves, and we're like, "Oh, that's who I know I can be."
Bang.
So going back to dating, P Truth again says there are more foibles and challenges for most of us dating as an openly presenting trans woman. Do you find yourself looking for different aspects in a partner than you did before you were out? Bonus question: how do you deal with creeps and chasers? And you're going to have to educate me. I know what a creep is, very familiar, but not sure what a creeper or what a chaser is. So, so do you look for something a little different? It sounds like you are more open and honest from the get-go about yourself.
I am. Yeah, I'm more open and honest about myself. But as far as who I'm looking for, like I'm just trying to open it up, because I have a narrative in my head that someone that I'm attracted to is not going to be attracted to me. So I'm trying to like broaden, you know, who I click on and who I decide to send a message to, because, you know, again, like I've had so many times, I mean, everybody does. I know this is everybody experience on dating sites is you find the perfect profile. The photos are great and just make your heart flutter, and then like every word you read, you just like, oh my God, like, oh, she's so perfect. Oh no, she's not perfect. We were meant for each other. Oh my God, we're supposed to be married now. Like, and then you're like, and you write the perfect message 7 times, and then you send it, and nothing. It's like, damn it. So then, you know, and you do that enough times, you're like, okay, well, let's just like open it up, and it's just like, well, this person's sort of okay, so let's, you know, so I guess that's kind of where it is. And the main thing for me with dating is like I just haven't done it. I have a like from somebody that I do find attractive on OkCupid, which a like means they actively clicked on something. So that's a good sign that, you know, and it's been multiple weeks and I haven't been able to get around to messaging them. So yeah, I just I need to get to that skirt first day at work point of just like just gonna honor it, just gonna go with it, and see what happens.
Fear of rejection is hard, and making that connection is hard. My boyfriend was on a number of dating sites. That's not how we met. You know that we met at the shanty night in person. But he has a lot of stories that sound exactly like this. Like, I'm crafting these beautiful messages. I'm working really hard on my profile, and not now, hopefully, right? But I'm working on these things, like, and crafting them, and I just can't get through the door. You know, and I know that if I get to the point where we're actually conversing, if I get through the door and we like are in person, we can make that connection. But getting over that hump is so hard. So, so I think again, this is another story that it resonates with anyone, you know, who's trying online dating.
So go back to the other half of the question. Yes. I rambled on that. Chaser is someone that is specifically attracted to or turned on by trans people.
Oh, okay.
And so, you know, you get a lot of creeps that, you know, this is where you'll get a lot of penis pics and things like that. And people just, you know, giving you the hey baby messages, or you look, you know, and I ignore all of that. I wouldn't say that I am completely opposed to the idea of a relationship with a guy. I'm just not attracted. Sexually, I'm pretty curious. I've lived a really prudish life, and it's a really short list of things that I would not try once. Like it's a really short list, and yet my sexual history does not support that. Just like, and but like I've thought about it several times of like I feel like it would be easier if I was attracted to men, because I think there are plenty of them that are out there that are attracted. Usually they are they're chasers, and they're like, you know, the kind of creepier ones, and they're really easy to just ignore from the get go. So that's what I do. I just ignore. The funny thing, so I did get to go back to San Francisco. Spent like 3 days there, fully out. This is kind of early in it, where I was just like, here we are, and redoing the trip with the girlfriend, basically in some ways. And I was surprised. I was getting hit on. I got hit on, or catcalled a lot, especially by black people, like African Americans, and I don't know if they're African or, you know, Cuban or whatever, but the dark skinned people seem to be attracted to me. That sounded horribly racist coming out of my mouth, but I don't know a way to say that isn't like that was the section of the population that was outwardly attracted to me, and it felt kind of nice. I wasn't down for it at the time, but it was interesting. Came out of a club. It was actually a transgender club, and again, like it was a lot of like clockable people, and it was early, so I just wasn't really that comfortable being there. But I came out, and there was this dapper as hell older black gentleman, the fedora hat, and, you know, he had the suit on with, I think, like an overcoat, and it was cool, but it was not particularly cold outside. But he's dressed to the nines, and he was kind of hey babying me and wanted to talk to me or whatever. And he was smooth. It was just like, you know what? Oh, I kind of regret. I think for the story alone, I probably should have hung out with that dude. But I the whole idea at that time just made me really uncomfortable, and you know, I'm just still a little uncomfortable with being approached or hit on by men.
Interesting. I know you and I love a dapper day, so I'm not surprised that you're like, oh hey. So Hitmaster has a really good question. I can't tell if it's a he or she, so I'll say they. They say, is it easier to give good advice to others compared to taking your own advice? And then how do you, it's kind of two parts, how do you remember to be kind to yourself?
It's immeasurably easier to give the good advice, especially having a show like this where any of the things that I've thought really get reinforced, because I get to talk to so many people. You know, as viewers, as audience, you get to see some of them. You know, Peach has seen pretty much all of it, but you know, I have this unique perspective of like having all of these different stories that bolster what I've thought. And yet, I think it's just time. It's just so ingrained in me, the negativity and the self-doubt, that it's still really hard to apply it. Or even if I do, like it isn't permanent, or it you know, it's not all the time. There's just those times where there's like a chink in the armor, and then it gets a little bit bigger, and then at some point it's just a gaping open wound of just that self-doubt, and then I lose all of it. Then I can't even remember the positive things. Like, it's not even a matter of like kind of fighting against it. Like, when I'm in that mode, the positivity, the positive thoughts and that knowledge just seems to disappear. And so, like, it's really easy to get into a bad spiral. Like I said, that was pretty much what happened to me last week.
Mm-hmm. This is a struggle that a lot of us have, you know, to kind of once once there's a chink in that armor, it's really hard to keep those negative thoughts from kind of growing. Mm-hmm. What are your favorite tips for kind of recovering from those places of negativity, and to remember to be kind to yourself? Like, it's a journey, right? It's mm-hmm. It's not a destination. And so we constantly have to kind of check in with ourselves to kind of keep those negative voices down, and to try to kind of control that negativity. So what are your favorite tips to help yourself remember to be kind to yourself?
Basically talking to others. This show really helps. because no matter how negative I am, when I hear other people being negative about themselves, when we get into those things, it's just like, oh, you shouldn't be self-conscious. Look how beautiful you are and how together you are. And it's just like, then that kind of reminds me in the back of my head of like, well, you're sort of being a hypocrite because you're telling them that they shouldn't have these negative thoughts about themselves. And you literally just said that to yourself like 3 hours ago. Mm-hmm. So that's a big thing that helps. It's just talking to people and the one thing that'll pull me out of it quickest is to talk to somebody about it and really open up and say the things that you're saying to yourself, because I'll guarantee you, when you say them out loud, they sound so stupid, and it's so easy to contradict it. Of like, well, I know it's not that no one's ever going to love me. That just sounds that's not true for anybody. Like there's always somebody out there that will love you. There's somebody out there for everybody. So that I think is the number one thing, because I can do anything. I can go and I can sit on my hammock. I can do something. If I can be creative and do something that comes out kind of awesome, that is a big thing that helps. But when I'm depressed, usually it's hard to be creative. But like I can go take wonderful baths, and I can listen to good Zen stuff and all these things. And yet the anxiety that comes from that negativity and the fear will blast through any of it. So when I get in a deep enough cycle, it's almost impossible to get out of it. And like I said, the only thing that's a true surefire one is to turn to somebody else and actually be willing to vocalize this stuff and just hear yourself saying it. It's nice to hear what they respond. But like if you're super negative and they're like bolstering you up, like I can tend to kind of tune that out. But I think it's when I vocalize the dumb things that are in my head that I realize, yeah, that's dumb. But there's no basis in it. It's not real.
Mm-hmm. I know for myself, a lot of times I have to step back and pretend that I'm someone else, and then think like, what would I say to somebody else going through this? And really, it's a journey, and it takes a lot of kind of stepping out of yourself. But like, what would I say if somebody was saying the same things to me, like from their experience?
Yeah. The weird thing for me is when I identify something or I find something that would be a good habit to get into doing. This seems off topic, but I'm going to try and tie it in anyways. Somebody on the show was talking about their transition and like being fearful of steps and getting over that. And what they did was they journaled and they said, if I could just push a button to be a woman, done all the way, true woman, would I do it? And just, she said yes. She answered it that one night. And the next night she said the same thing, but she added something. If I had to come out to my whole family that I was going to be a woman and then could push the button to become a woman, would I do it? And she kept adding to it. And when she got to the end of like, if I had to go through all these 1,000 steps, would I want to fully transition? And the answer was still yes. Then she knew and was confident in going forward. She'd gone through the whole mental exercise. And it's like, oh, that's such a great idea. And that will help so much. And I've never done it once. Oh, no, that's not true. I did do it once, but I never followed up with it. And there's so many of those things of like, I know this would help me if I got into this habit. And the negativity is just strong enough to, for some reason, hold me back from starting that. And that's the thing that confounds me the most.
Every day is a new day, though, like every moment's an opportunity to make a different decision. I think one thing that sort of on this note, one thing that I've heard works and I've seen it work is when you're looking at these scenarios and you're running scenarios like, oh my God, what's going to happen when I wear a skirt to work the first time? You start brainstorming these scenarios, right? And the negative brain is really good at like coming up with all of these crazy things that can happen. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you go like worst case scenario. What is the worst thing that can happen? Okay. Barring that, what's the next worst thing that can happen? And you just keep dialing it back, and you realize that it's actually probably not going to be as bad as you thought it was, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a fun.
That makes sense. The worst case scenario is unlikely. Like, yeah, it could happen, but it's unlikely. And then when you back off of that a couple steps, it's just like, well, I could probably deal with that.
Yeah, it's
Even
probably not
if that
big.
happened, it's like I could deal with it. Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, so Peter asked a question that's pretty similar to what we've been talking about previously. And so address whatever parts you feel haven't been addressed yet in our talk. She says, do you find your feminine side has always been around, perhaps lurking in the background? I think we kind of covered that. Has it led you into more creative fields? We may have covered that, but if you have additional topics that you'd like to cover, that's perfect. And then the third question is, has it helped you in relationships in the past as well as friendships? I think that's probably an area that we haven't yet trod into.
Yeah, it took me a very long time to realize that feminine side was what it was, and that it has always been there. And then, that goes back, that kind of lights a candle on things that that seemed to be a little off for me. Like I didn't understand the way men treated women, and I see a beautiful woman and I'm attracted to her, and it turns me on in a way, but it's never. And I love I love TNA. I love boobs and curves and the whole thing and all of that. But it's never been like, oh, and that gets me. That gets me hard. Just got to go there. Like that's the truth. Like it's never been that. It's like, oh my God, like I love her and she's so beautiful, and I want to get to know her, and I want to hold her, and I want to talk about like our dreams and our fears and everything. And it's always been from like the more feminine side. Like I see that she's attractive, but it's not like, oh, I want to plow her. Like that's never been the thing that pops into my head. Even though I am sexually attracted to them, but like that's not where it comes from. And just other things like that I love talking and being open and all that. I have been for a good part of my adult life unashamed of the fact that I cry at everything. We had a funny moment, kind of heart of stone sort of thing. We were watching Finding Neverland in the theater, and my wife was in the center, a friend was on one side, and I was on the other. And at some point, she's like looking at the two of us, and we're just sobbing uncontrollably. And she's just like what? and like I've never been. Probably when I was trying to be super macho, like in high school and stuff, I would have.
She's still frozen.
Oh.
Oh. We lost you for a second.
Did you? Oh.
Yep. Are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Did. Yeah, you were frozen for probably 20 seconds. Okay, great. So.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, I'm sure your response was incredibly moving and wonderful. But you get a second chance if it wasn't perfect.
Do you know what you heard?
You were talking about how you couldn't understand how men were treating women, and how like you love TNA, and how that turns you on but didn't get you hard. I'm assuming this is not a family show. I'm not going to pull any punches here. What I'm curious about, based on Peach's comment here, is how has being in touch with your feminine side and sort of your growing embracing of that over time, has it helped you feel like it's helped you in relationships as well as friendships, other than just being able to cry at the same movies? I cried everything too. So
I think it hasn't changed. It's kind of why I was really good at relationships. Mm-hmm. I think my ability to be empathetic and to really be interested emotionally in how your day was. Like when I ask, like I really do care about the struggles you've had and how it made you feel emotionally, and like I'm invested in that. And that's just something that now I can identify, and I see it in there. I don't feel like it's changed. I feel like it's always been part of me. As far as applying it to life, like I'm still trying to do that. There was a moment where I was thinking about that, of like, well, does this open me up now finally to like think about, do I want to do like a fashion design career, or some kind of area that is more traditionally female or feminine that I've kind of pulled away from before. So I don't think I've really identified that or gone to that yet, but that definitely, that thought has entered my mind. And, just, in general, also going and trying to make my entire world more feminine, the bedding and stuff. And I've got Penny there on my little stuffed unicorn. She's a recent purchase that I snuggle with. Just allowing myself some of those things of like, well, that's super feminine, and I haven't really considered it before because, like, I couldn't. And let's try that, and it's all been wonderful to do. And so I'm still trying to feel that out.
So here's a good question. I really like this one. It's from Mira Dubdubs. She says, "Is there anything, in parentheses, trans related, that in hindsight you wish you would have done differently?" I think that this is particularly interesting because I think we tend to be hard on ourselves in the past. We look at our past selves and we're kind of hard on ourselves because we know that knowing what we know now, we would have made different decisions. Like if we had known then what we know now. Mm-hmm. But in hindsight, aside from maybe this dapper gentleman outside the club, is there anything that in hindsight that you would have done differently? Like knowing, if you knew then what you know now?
Mm. Yeah, I kind of snickered at that when you started to ask that, because I'm just like, yeah, everything. And luckily, for some reason, this is the one place where what you said, we're usually harder on ourselves in retrospect. This is one of the areas where I'm not. I look back at that kid, at that person that was growing up and was dealing with this, and I really feel sorry for them. I really wish they'd been able to realize earlier and just be happier with themselves and not so hard on themselves. Of this is just everything. I was so afraid of every little step and every aspect of it, and I couldn't possibly be harder on myself now than I was going through it. And it's just sad. It's sad, and it's kind of scary. Some of the how dark it got for me, and it was just so unnecessary. I wish I had realized so much earlier, and then on top of that, realized that it's not a big deal. Hold your head up high and be happy with who you are. You're a lovely person, and you will find a great community, a lot of people that love you and support you. I just wish I that's the big regret I have, is I didn't have my own back. I didn't support myself.
Mm-hmm. And what's the biggest lesson? I know we've talked sort of generally about sort of trans journey. What if you had to speak to like young Emily living in this kind of other world? What's the one thing, if you could time travel, that you would tell young Emily, who didn't even know she was Emily yet?
Yes. Yeah, kind of blowing her mind. Like, how much time do I have? Because like
one thing.
I know.
Like you have 30 seconds to impart a message. What's the one thing? Because I think there's going to be someone watching this that like they need the one thing that they can take away, right? Mm-hmm. And they probably had, like, there's people out there that have had similar experiences, because we're all more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
So what's that one thing that you would like tell that person who's watching this secretly on their phone and their mom doesn't know?
Well, the three things I would say is, you're trans, it's okay, and people will love and support you.
That's perfect. I love it. Okay, so we have a few more questions. Lots of activity, which I love. I love to see.
Wonderful.
So Mira Dubs asks, what's your favorite piece of clothing? I think we all have a favorite dress or a favorite bra or a favorite pair of underpants that like make us really feel us, or make us feel really strong and empowered. Or so what's your favorite piece of clothing?
In a lot of ways, it's still where it was from the very, very start. I, at Macy's about 2 years ago, found this INC bra and panties collection. And for a brief period, they had really pretty colors. Because usually, it's just black and tan and white. Super boring. But they had matching. It's been really hard for me to find matching bras and panties. And they had beautiful sets. And so I bought the crap out of them. I have like, I don't know, 6 or 7 bras in the rotation currently with matching thongs and or brief panties, and then I actually have a backup stash still in the packaging because I ordered them online. Once I saw like they're not going to do those colors anymore, I bought a bunch more, so I have them in reserve because I love them so much. They fit so well, and I feel so feminine with them. And then beyond that, I love dresses. I love flowery dresses. So a good spring flowery dress just really gets me going. I love those. I went with a flowery top and skirt today.
I love it, and the pink earrings with the matching bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
Noticed. Yeah, I love it.
Thank you. And I love how the lip color even ended up kind of matching.
The lip color well. Too. Yeah, I'm a little jealous because I didn't have time to put on my own lipstick. I'm regretting. Okay, so fun question. Again from Mira. Out of the 13, now 14 people that you've had on your show, who's been your favorite?
I'm going to...
Could answer, but let's not.
I'm going to plead the fifth and not reveal the one particular person. I've mentioned her, alluded to her before, just in cases, but I have had so many great conversations on here. It's really unfair for you to try and pin me down to that, Mira. That especially since I've had so many of my close friends on here, that choosing favorites is so tough. It was so wonderful that as soon as I came up with the idea, I'm going to do this show, will one of you be on the show? I put that out to my closest friends, a small group of friends here, and Madison immediately said yes. Without knowing what the format was, what the questions were going to be, how deep it was going to be, how like probing and all that kind of stuff, she was just willing to dive in with me and discover what the show was going to be in a way together. And I'll be eternally grateful for that. And I love the fact that she was my first episode, and I am also super grateful for that. I love the friendship I've been able to slowly kind of build up with Ashley, of Ashley Versus fame. I don't know. I've really enjoyed joking around with her, and I don't know. I just there's just too many to list because it's been it's a short job. We're talking 3 months, but it's already been pretty wonderful to have all of these great guests on, and to have those interactions turn into friendships has been so great. And I mean, how wonderful was Erin too? So 4 or 5 episodes ago, I had the spouse of a transgender woman in this community on, and we got to dive into everything about their relationship and how she took it when her wife came out to her as trans and all of that. So I think I answered the question and dodged it at the same time.
Perfect. Very perfect and savvy. There's a lot of questions that I have that I'd love to hear that I'm sure that you'd love to hear as well. But keeping on this kind of reflecting on past episodes of your show, I'd love to hear some of the key takeaways that maybe you found most surprising that resonated with you with some of your guests. You don't have to name them by person, and maybe it's sort of a conglomeration of pieces from different guests. But I'm sure that there's things that you've kind of been able to internalize that maybe surprised you a little bit. So I'd love to hear 1 to 3 of those things that maybe resonated with you the most.
Yeah, the biggest one that we've gotten that was the biggest soundbite was from Ashley's, I think. And that was, if people turn away from you when you come out to them, and you lose friendships, you lose relationships, that is the garbage. That is the garbage taking itself out. Mm-hmm. That is the people that aren't meant to be in your life removing themselves from your life and making it easier for you. Such a wonderful sentiment, and so true, because that's one of the big things that we fear in coming out to people is we're going to lose so much. No one's going to want to talk to us. We're going to lose all our friendships. And again, that's the thing that you've been trying to hit on a lot too, is changing that mindset from negative to positive. Like, it's a good thing that people who aren't going to accept you fully, aren't going to support you, and aren't going to have your back are gone. Mm-hmm. It's such a wonderful thing. I loved when Michelle was talking about that little journal of, taking it in baby steps. We think of the journey as this whole big daunting thing, and there's all these big steps. Am I going to want surgery? Am I going to want this surgery? Am I going to, and when's the right time? And just, backing off and breaking into pieces. Like, if I could just magically be a woman, would I do it? Yes. And then back away from there and give yourself the confidence of like, no, I really do want to go through all these steps to get there, and it's going to be okay, and we're going to do it. Just, again, all of Aaron's story about how they worked through things and stayed together, and, through a transition. I mean, your partner's changing gender. Everything is changing. And yet so much of it isn't changing, because so much of the person that you love is still there. And, seeing someone who is cisgendered have that realization and know that, or have had that experience, is wonderful. So many great personal stories and things that resonate with the same fears, the same self-doubts, and yet we're all here, we're all in it together. It's that I think is one of the big takeaways, is that, like, it's less that there are other people that are going through the same thing as me, and more that we are in it together. I may not see you on a daily basis or whatever, but we're in the same boat, we're rowing the same way, and we're going to do this together. Mm-hmm. I love that thought, and I feel like that's kind of what this is cumulatively doing. I almost got that word out right.
Absolutely. So let's switch base a little bit. I'm gonna send out solicitation. If you sent me a question in the chat that I have not answered, can you just repost it so that I make sure I don't miss it? In the meantime, Emily, can you talk a little bit about your selection of your name? Like, how did you find it? At what point did you kind of decide that was your internal name? And at what point did you decide to make that external? Mm-hmm. First, I would guess part-time, and then sort of full-time. I'd be interested to hear that journey, because I think naming is powerful, right? We talk about defining yourself. That's the ultimate definition. And so it's a big thing. I regret not having a better story like Ariana's. How she was looking up like sort of like Greek goddesses and mythology for some kind of powerful and wonderful story, and she found something. I loved the story of the girl who took the name that her mom would have named her if she was born a girl. Such great ideas. I wish I'd been able to see these episodes beforehand, so I could have made mine a little bit more interesting. I just feel like what I did was I cross-referenced 3 lists. Names I thought were feminine and pretty, names of people I knew, and then their children and pets. Because like I didn't want to end up naming myself after a friend or someone I knew, or someone in their family. Like there's a finite amount of names, and of course when you're choosing your name, you kind of want it to be normal and easy to kind of fit in and all of that.
And so that's what I came down to. And Emily was one of the few that were there. And I'm like, I like that. And of course, like, I didn't feel like it fit me at all. Like, it's so different. My name is my born name. My given name is very traditionally masculine. Has a couple different variations that are extremely masculine. So going to something feminine, which is what I want, was really hard to like accept. I still really love the name Stephanie, but I had a really close friend at the time that was named Stephanie. I'm kind of blanking on some of the other ones, but there were a lot that I really loved, but I also happen to know a lot of people that were named that, and I just, I was afraid of that appearance, and I was just like, that would be super awkward. So I was really happy to come up with Emily and find a name that in my circle was unique, but was still really feminine, and I liked it. Funny tangent, I like names for girls that shorten to boy names. Okay. So, like, I love that for yours, Amanda, you shortened it to Andy, which is unique in and of itself. But I always loved like an Alex or a Sam or a Tony. I always thought that was super cute. And when coming to choose my name, I absolutely wanted to make sure that I did not choose one of those. Because I didn't want to end up with a boy name again after all of it. So like Emily shortens to nothing. Like you've got M, and that's it. And there aren't any masculine M's. Like it's even James Bond's M they cast as a woman for most of it. So
it's funny that you say that and you pick out Alex. You know how you pick out names in your foreign language classes that are in that foreign language. My French class for several years, my name was Alexandre. So my French name was Alex, basically. Apparently, I'm with you in liking my feminine names shortened into masculine names, or at least gender neutral names.
Uh-huh.
If Emily occasionally has a question that's directly on this topic, she says, "How do you deal with folks who have your name already, or that emulate you?" Or I would say, EmilyWouldGo you. I'm gonna force the pun. I'm into it.
Yeah, this is how you know that Andy and I are friends, because I love a horrible pun. That one was a little shoehorned. So I don't know, but the interesting thing is there are two other Emilys in this circle, and one of them's a prominent one. I had her on 2 episodes ago. I tried to do an Emily versus Emily thing, and it kind of fell flat. But I have found more Emilys now, but it's not. It's not. I already have this name, so the only worry I had was people thinking I was like naming myself after them. Now I could meet a million Emilys and I wouldn't care. Like I could live in a house full of Emilys and it'd be just fine. Like I love my name now for me, and it took a little bit of time to get used to people calling me that, and to have it resonate of like, that's not the name I'm having people calling me. That is my name. Mm-hmm. That took a while for that shift to happen, but that was another really nice step when like Emily is my name. And another fun story that I don't know if I ever got to tell on this show. A friend of mine and I were at the beach about a month ago, and we're walking back up to her house, and a guy kind of flags us down, and we go over, and he's with a woman, so like you feel kind of safe, whatever. And he's like, "You're one of those transsexuals, right?" I roll, "Yeah." Like he was one of those kind of drunk and all that. It's just like I'm not gonna pull out my dictionary and whatever. Let's get through this conversation and whatever. And so the conversation itself was fine. And he asked, we introduced ourselves to each other, and I said, Emily. And then a little bit later in the conversation, he says, "So what's your real name?" And I without skipping a beat, I said, "No, Emily's my real name." And that was the first time I'd ever done that. And my friend was really impressed with me. And I was just like, yeah, I'm kind of impressed with that too, because I didn't hesitate. I'm like, okay, yeah, this really is me. I fully accepted it now that this is my name. I had a name before, and if you'd phrased it differently, I might have been willing to share it. But when you ask me what my real name is, I'm at the point now where this is my real name.
I love it. Beautiful. I love it. And I had the conversation one time at the tiki bar. I think you were already in my phone as Emily, and I heard someone call you by your other name, and I don't even remember what it was because my brain, like, I asked you specifically what you preferred to be called, and you did hesitate at that moment, and then you said Emily, because I think I pressed you on it, because I think you were like, oh, whatever you want, and I was like, no, what would you prefer? And you said Emily, and I said okay, and then I just like let the rest of it go.
Yeah, that you asked the question before, and I missed that. You said, what would you regret? What did you regret? What would you go back and change? That was the worst thing that I did in my transition. Is I held on to my previous name and that persona, and I sort of went back and forth, and it wasn't that big of a deal for me. It would have been much better if I'd gone with Emily and just stuck with it. I know that now. No big deal. What it was bad for was for my friends and acquaintances. It got really confusing for them, especially I feel really bad for my friends at work that we hung out outside of work. So it's like, okay, in this situation you're Emily, but then over here and at work and in this situation then you're the other name. So it was really unfair to them, and I see that now, and I like that's one of the few big regrets that I really have on where I went through the transition.
How euphoric is it for that to have someone just call you Emily, like, unhesitatingly? Is it like so euphoric?
Yeah, it is, and that's a little bit of a trap that you got to make sure you don't fall into when you're transitioning, because it is more comfortable and easier to hang out with people that know you as your feminine name, and I kind of find myself like less just unabashedly ready to go and hang out with the friends that knew me before. At least definitely for a period there. It's just like I wish there was a word like euphoricizing. It does bring you so much euphoria to have people address you as that and to know you as that. It's so wonderful that, like I said, it's a little bit of a trap that you could fall into and kind of forsake the people that do accept you and do love you, but like they knew you before, and you have your own thing in your head of like, oh, do they still think of me as that? Especially when people slip sometimes, pronouns are wrong, things like that. It's just so much better to be in a community. I don't know. I've loved being in the trans community where it's there. You never get any of those questions. You never get misgendered. It's always the right name. Because even some of like the Ventiki people that know me as Emily, I still do get like a he every once in a while. So even amongst those that truly accept it, there are some moments where, being in a good trans community is great. But then conversely to that, I feel like that's the expectation, that the trans community will get it right. And so it almost causes more euphoria when the general public gets it and calls you miss or ma'am, uses the right pronouns and uses the right name. I feel like there's more power in that because like they're not obligated to, and they're not as educated, and so you feel naturally more like you're accepted, you're passing, it's working. All of this is working. If normal people call you by that name or know you as that or gender you correctly.
So one thing that we haven't talked about, and you can draw the line, it's your show, you can draw whatever boundaries you're comfortable with, but we've talked about your wife and some of your ex-girlfriends, but what we haven't talked about is your family. And I know that has been kind of a process of acceptance, sort of in this vein of kind of like knew you before for like a substantial period of time before you started sort of
most of my life, yeah.
Right. So, and I know that's been kind of a journey for you, and I know that that's been something that's improved in recent years. but it's still clearly pretty much still a process.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that kind of journey and kind of where that is, and how you are dealing with that, and what you might recommend for someone who's in a similar experience in a similar place?
It very similar to the last point of, like, not going sooner and saying like, I'm Emily, and just sticking with the one gender and not going back and forth. I still haven't found the moment to put down my foot and say, no, this is my name, and these are my pronouns. I don't know if it's fear or like lack of feeling like I have the right to push that on them and make them, use the proper pronouns. And so I think I've let that go too long. I did tell them, I did tell my parents 8 months ago or so. I asked my mom, I'm like, so do you know about the Emily thing, that I go by Emily? And I think I said sometimes. I don't know. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I said that I go by Emily with a lot of people and all. And basically got yeah, I know about it. And, sort of like it was just basically the same sort of thing that I got from the girls. Like, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not ready for that sort of a thing. So then I decided, okay, to back off. And now I'm not sure where that line is, where that moment is. I guess I've just gone with the gradual process with them. I had the back and forth where I would go dressed in guy's clothes and doing the guy thing, but then sometimes I would be sort of feminine and then a little bit more feminine, and then finally I got to the point where like, no, I want to wear a skirt over there. I'm gonna do it, and then got to the point of like full time. Whenever I go over there, makeup and dressed as feminine as I want, and that's just the thing. And so I guess I should give myself more credit on it, that I am sticking with it, but I'm making it really gradual for them, and I'm not pushing it for them. I'm starting to notice that being misgendered and dead named, which is something a term I've never really liked. I thought it was too much, like too over dramatic. But I'm starting. Yeah, your old name. Yeah, they call it in the community dead name, when someone dead names you or calls you your dead name. And I just thought that sounded overly dramatic. But I'm getting to the point where like I do get the pangs, like it's just like, oh, when they call me that. It's starting to become an issue. So I think it's just allowing the time to pass and allowing people to get comfortable with the idea, but being true to yourself and what it is that you need to feel comfortable and to feel happy about yourself. Because when someone refuses to call you the name that you've chosen and decided is your identity, it's invalidating. It's telling you that no, you're not good enough, you're not important enough to be called what you want to be called. I'm going to call you what I want to call you. It's much more complicated and nuanced than that, but it does get to feel that way. And so that's when you need to make the decision and decide to put your foot down. They're pretty conservative, and we talked in one episode a lot about ultimatums and not making ultimatums in a relationship and stuff like that, because as soon as you do, then the person's like, well, I'm going to go the other way then. And it's like, oh crap. And that's where I've been. I didn't want to put the ultimatum down because I didn't want the opposite to be their choice, where they're like, okay, then we're done here. I specifically had the conversation with my dad, and he was kind of asking me some of these things of like, well, what? He was kind of trying to wrap his head around some of this stuff, and I'm like, well, basically what I need from you is just to open the door. When I come over, whatever our relationship is and how it goes, like, we can fudge that, but like as long as you open the door when I come over, as long as you don't shun me completely, I can work with it.
The conversation's still happening, right?
Yeah.
As long as you're communicating.
Yeah. So just I guess in your relationships, that's another piece of advice I have. In your relationships, family, significant others, friends, try and avoid the ultimatums. Try and read the room as good as you can. Stand up for yourself, but don't unnecessarily put the hard lines down in the ultimatums. Just be realistic about when those need to be drawn and when you can kind of let it go.
So Peach asked another question just now, which is
really
perfect for what we were talking about. I know, shocking. Peach says, what is it like having an incredible support group of friends, family, and coworkers, and a community supporting you? Did you find a secondary family in the transgender community?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it goes back to that other question of like, how do you get out of those negative thoughts and the depression and stuff like that? It's turning to friends. It's having those friends, having that support group. It's knowing that other people are going through the same thing that you are and being able to, obviously with doing the show, I get as much or more from helping others as I do from people helping me. This community has given me all of that. In spades and in ways that I wasn't expecting. I started finding transgender community by going onto Instagram and following people. And again, those are, they're on HRT, they're beautiful, they have thousands of followers, their life looks perfect because all the photos are like so perfectly done. So it was still very much at a distance. It was still very far out, and was nice to see, but there wasn't there wasn't a connection. There were some posts where they would open up and be raw and say something that resonated, and those were the moments where I felt kind of let in, but a lot of it was still at that kind of distance. So finding Twitch and being able to go in and in the chat, and then finding the group of girls that I did that we play Fortnite and do all this stuff, finding a real true group of friends like that I could call or reach out to at any time with some stupid thing that's going on in my brain that I know is not real, but it's just like it's really screwing me up, or that's I have plenty of friends for that, but having the friends that understand, that are in the same boat as you are, like I said before, it's just so much more valuable. And I think I don't know what I would say on it, because I tried to get into a trans community early and it was too much for me. So if at first it doesn't work, like take a break and come back to it, but don't put it away, don't put it off for too long, because there is so much to be found in having the community. Even if you are kind of going back and forth on your identity, I'm trans, I'm fully trans, or a lot of people we're talking about are trans. Most of us are male to female, but there are a lot of other ways to define yourself and your gender. Of course, there's female to male, the opposite, but there's a lot in between. And there are people out there that are like you, and it's so important to find them and to have them on your side. I'm rambling. I got way off.
Great.
I felt like fell off the deep end there.
No, it's perfect. I don't think that we ever really fall off the deep end talking about how well supported we are by our friends, because I think I've told you before, really, I believe that friends are the family you choose, right? And
yes.
So I think that speaks more volumes than maybe just like the family you were born into.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like I was talking about earlier, like I honestly think that today, because we do Toxic Tuesday, where we play our game and we're just really shitty to each other. We make fun of each other and we like call each other names, and we say you're stupid for what you did, and like, why did you die, or whatever. Just as absolutely crappy to each other as we can be. And that's such a wonderful place to be able to get to with friends, where you can let off steam together at each other and know that you don't mean it and they don't mean it, and it's just silliness. that's such a wonderful place to be at with a group of friends, and I think that's how you know that it's a true they're true friends. And I can't remember the last time. I think it was my friends from high school. Actually, no, that's not true. I did find another group, but after the divorce, like that kind of fell apart. So having that level of friendship where you feel comfortable enough to be nasty and to just be irreverent, that is so valuable.
Yeah, I think, they tell you when you're a kid, when you're an awkward kid, like I was an awkward kid, and they tell you, and I think we're all awkward kids, right? I think that's like a rule of growing up. Like we all have to be awkward kids or feel like awkward kids. They tell you that the more authentically yourself you are, the more you feel yourself, and the more self-confident you are in just you, like the more you'll find people that are like you. But if you're kind of like struggling or trying to fit into this group or fit into that group, and you're not just trying to fit in with yourself, it's harder for you to find your people, right? Because you're not being authentic. And so it's no surprise that now that you're sort of embracing this authentic Emily, right? This and sort of like letting her blossom and glow out of every pore, that you find this great community of people that you can do that with and just completely go completely open with. Well, so this actually, go ahead.
That's something that I didn't realize before either is you hear these things about being more confident, self-confidence. It's all about confidence in any situation. You find girls, you find friends, all that stuff. It's all about confidence. You get good jobs, all that. But the thing that I don't think I ever heard or didn't resonate or didn't sink in is where the confidence comes from. You can't decide to be confident and just go and be confident. There's a fake it till you make it thing, and that works to a certain degree, but like it's really hard to get there. Confidence comes from loving yourself, from accepting yourself and loving yourself. And once you truly love yourself, then you are confident because you're like, I like me. And maybe it's sort of that, like you give less shits about what other people think about you because it's like, well, I like me, so that's enough. But so much of it comes from that, and I wish I'd realized that earlier, of just accepting and loving yourself is where the confidence will come from. Trying to fight against and be more confident and just go out there and be confident is hard unless you have that foundation of self-love underneath it.
Absolutely. So I do want to address, I do want to get into, there's a question in your core questions that I think will be really interesting, which is about sort of where you feel like you are in your transition process or in your journey. But Peach comments, she says, Toxic Tuesday is very cathartic for us, which I think you expressed. Sadly, in the trans community, there's a lot of negativity, depression, and high cases of self-harm and substance abuse. Are there any great coping methods that you know of that you would suggest for others to deal with toxic comments or generally feeling let down?
Yeah, I think that the only answer I really have to that is to reach out to your friends, to find those people and to talk openly to them. But negative comments and stuff, like they can be really hard to get over, especially if it's in a circle or a group of people that you want their approval, you want their acceptance. A negative comment there can really just cut the legs out from under you. And I find, again, when I get into those negative areas, it's really difficult to get out of those unless I have someone to turn to talk openly with. I think finding someone to be nasty to and to know that you don't mean it, like, it goes back to that same thing of like, I can pick on my brother, but you can't. I will kill you, kind of a thing, There's just something that is so familial about that when you get to that level of, this is a safe place to... Being nasty shows you that you can be tender, that you can be open, because it's just like, well, if I can say this horrible shit and you're still my friend, then like I can open up and really be vulnerable to you. And yeah, I know it's hard to find that, but there are so many people, and even if you don't have that circle of friends yet, there are still a lot of resources, specifically for trans people, because so many of us go through this. The Trevor Project is a great suicide prevention, but also just kind of helpline. There's a lot of those out there that if you don't have that circle of friends, you still do. There are those places you can reach out to and still get that and have that support, and a place where you can be completely open and honest, and they will understand and accept it, and basically hopefully have the right words to say to make you feel better about yourself. The easiest thing to do when you get negative comments and negativity is to turn away and to turn in on yourself, and to add on to it and say, yeah, they're right. I am nothing. I am not important enough, or whatever. It's a nasty spiral, and that's why the sooner you can reach outside of that, the better. We have a friend in the circle of friends that we're all kind of a little pissed at right now because she disappeared for a while, and it's disappointing because it's just like, that's what we're here for. I don't know that I answered that question, actually.
No, I think people are going to reach out when they're ready to hear. I think, we all struggle with like either negative self-talk or negative talk from outside individuals for one reason or another. Because again, these are journeys that we can find elements of that we resonate with. I think for me, a lot of times when I experience negativity from other people for one reason or another, they don't like what I'm doing or whatever it is. And I say the same thing to friends of mine, which is why I bring it up. But if their opinion is one that is important to you, like if some random dude on the street starts saying toxic comments to you, how much do you really care about that dude's opinion? Right? Like probably not that much, right? Whereas like I care much more about the opinions of friends of mine who I respect and who I value and who I have this relationship built up with and who I go to for advice. And so if I go to them for advice and I respect their opinion, and then they're also like, oh, you're gonna look like a hot mess today, right? Like, okay, maybe I think that's honest. That's coming from an honest place, and I know that's coming from a loving place. Like your trash talk is coming from a loving place. Whereas, like if some dude at the Starbucks is like, man, you look like a hot mess, I'd be like, all right. Like I don't care about your opinion. Like that's your opinion. Like fine.
Yeah.
I think that's we talked a little bit earlier about tips and techniques to kind of like squelch some of that negative talk or letting those toxic things kind of like worm their way into us. And while mindfulness is always a journey and it's a continual thing you have to check in with, for me, that's always a helpful kind of meter by which I gauge whether or not I'm going to take someone's opinion into consideration or not.
Yeah, I had I'm feeling a little tangential on this too, but I had a wonderful experience when a friend of mine and I were in San Diego. I'm still not sure if she eventually will fully identify as female to male trans. She's a lesbian, and she's always dressed pretty butch. And so the two of us went to San Diego. So I love to tell people that I love when we go into like a restaurant or whatever, and I feel like you can see on the you can read their minds where they're like, wait. So he's, but she's, and they're, because we're such close friends that like we sort of probably look like we're together. Anytime it's just two people, like you kind of make the assumption. And I just love the fact that we're flipped, right? We were in San Diego. We're walking down the street, and we cross the street, and a homeless guy is there, and he is like looking at our feet, and he says, do you have any change? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't. And my voice doesn't pass. It doesn't match with what he saw for the shoes. And he looks up and looks at me, looks at her, looks at me, and just says, "Fag, fag." And like as we're walking down the street, he keeps screaming it. And those are the moments that like really make it easier. Like you said, your guy at Starbucks, like, what the fuck do you care about what he says? And you know, it's sort of like those levels thing where, like, this was so cartoony that this is one of my friend and my favorite things to joke about these days. And like, we will call each other fag all the time because it's so fucking hilarious. And it's that same thing. If that doesn't matter at all to me because it's so cartoonish or whatever, and it's just this random guy in the street, then this other person who's at Starbucks, who's not homeless, he's more got his shit together, but still is just somebody off the street, why would I care about that? And why would I care about this? And then like somebody at work, like, you know, maybe there's a thought in there of just like, you know, there's the easy moments to throw away, and then the other comments we want to kind of cling to because they're like, oh, it seems to hit closer to home or something. But I think there's something to that, of finding that same perspective on it. It's just some random, it's not the person that I really care about telling me this, so I shouldn't care about it at all.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, and like you said, there's people from all walks of life. Sometimes a compliment from a homeless person is the thing that makes your day, right? Because you're just like, wow, that's really nice. So it's not really about where you are in life. It's just about whether or not you choose to accept or dismiss that opinion, because they're just opinions, right? Mm-hmm. So Jess started chiming in with questions. So she asks, are there behaviors, actions, or patterns that members of trans communities could either adopt or avoid to improve them? So this looks like this is kind of aimed at how do you improve your own community, and which patterns or behaviors or actions would you do to improve those communities, or try to excise from those communities to then improve them? Like, are there negative traits that you think can kind of be in those trans communities that you think maybe should be kind of excised, or positive behaviors that you can build on to improve the community? Interesting.
God, that's a thought-provoking one that I haven't thought to address before. I feel pretty new to the community, so I don't know that there's a lot that I would have thoughts on what to change. I have heard of some things, like there have been some things that have been going on some like Discord servers recently where there just seems like to be some cattiness and things like that. And I, from an outside perspective on the inside, I would think that what it is kind of the definitions, overly defining things, and what is trans behavior and what's not, and what's acceptable there. Somebody was in the Transvengers, I'm a mod on there, and they were saying, oh, I don't really belong here because I'm a cis male and there's not a lot of guys here. And the great thing was there were a lot of people chiming in the chat, well, I'm a guy, and I messaged them privately and said, you're a valuable part of this, because someone that's willing to come in and learn and all that and be accepting is cisgendered is really important. So what I would guess that what's going on a lot of time is people trying to define too strongly what's good trans behavior and what's not, what's acceptable and what's not, and just kind of back off it and realize we're all trying to figure this out. Even during Toxic Tuesday, I said something that as soon as it was coming out of my mouth, I'm like, that was over the line, I shouldn't have said it. It's a tricky environment to be in, because we're all in the same boat, but we're all in different places with it, and we're all in different levels of acceptance of ourselves and of others. I think I'm ashamed to say that one of the things about that first trans group that was the reason I didn't hang around with it was I was uncomfortable hanging out with clockable trans women. I still to this point feel like I am clockable, but it's easier because I can't see myself at all times to like look at these and go like, these are guys in dresses and I'm like uncomfortable being around them. Super hypocritical. Again, like I said, I was kind of ashamed that that's how I felt, but there is a lot of that in a lot of us, of like, it sometimes can be hard for us to accept others and what they're going through, because of the things that we are still struggling to accept in ourselves. And so I think it's easy to cross boundaries and cross lines sometimes with other people. There are pitfalls, and then there's the conversely. I think there's a lack of acceptance of that, of like, you're gonna make mistakes and you're gonna say some dumb things, and don't just assume that it's coming from a negative place. Like it's coming from a place of like, I'm trying to figure this out too. It may have been over a line for you, or you may not agree with what my perspective or something, but I think there's more pitfalls in the trans community because of that lack of, it's not a true defined process. It's not like on day one you define yourself as trans, and then by day 5 you've got your HRT and all this. Like, there's a lot of variance in this journey to become accepting and to get to the places we want to of ourselves, and at the same time, in parallel, accepting of others. I feel like I rambled, but I got to where a good point there, and it's just like just accepting and trying not to define things too hard in ourselves or in others, of appropriate behavior.
It sounds like compassion, if I can paraphrase, it sounds like compassion is key, right? But both having compassion for yourself and understanding you're going to make missteps, and being compassionate when other people make those missteps, particularly if they're maybe earlier in their journey and they haven't made those yet, being compassionate to kind of welcome them in and be compassionate to that journey, and then exercising that compassion for yourself, because you have to accept yourself first, right? Like, that's no one else can do that for you. People can help, but ultimately all of that change comes from inside.
Yeah.
How far along would you say that you're on your journey? And I'm going to follow that up with one of your other questions and say, like, what were some of the biggest learning curves or things that you've had to get used to?
I feel my story is kind of interesting. I feel like I'm pretty far along and at the very beginning at the same time, because I came out at work and started dressing full time, 4 years ago, but didn't change my name to Emily until about a year ago, and didn't start HRT until a month ago. So it's been a long road of self-acceptance and getting into this, and then but then also, like, I've been in it for a long time. So I think what that brings up is some of that kind of self-disappointment of where I'm not at yet, and kind of judging myself against, where I should be and things like that. But I'm also really trying to find that place of and I had that realization this week that, ooh, I got to cut myself some freaking slack. I just started HRT. Like, a lot of these girls, as soon as they define themselves, they went on HRT. So they've got the jump on me there. So I can't judge myself against those things. And just kind of backing off of that, and again, allowing my journey to be what it is. But I still feel like in a lot of ways I'm totally a noob with it. I got my makeup down pretty good, and in the 3 or 4 years, I really have not gotten into practicing hair stuff. I've got a couple styles that I like, but it's been forever since I tried to curl it. I've never sat down and really tried, like, spent a weekend trying to learn how to braid it.
Girl, let's do it together. I'm going to teach you how to braid. Done.
So yeah, like I said, in a lot of ways, that is sort of what brings up some of that kind of imposter syndrome, is because I feel like I am super new to a lot of it, to some of the core experiences and core things you go through in transitioning, because it's just taken me so long to get there. I'm fine and happy with my transition because I needed that time. It was a major rock to get over, that negativity, and it just couldn't have happened much sooner. But Yeah, it's I'm glad to finally have the ball rolling and really moving towards something that's gonna, bring about those good feelings and really make me feel like, okay, the body is starting to feel right and look right, and here we go.
Well, it's also easy to fall into the trap of thinking that outward surface is a reflection of the inward process, right? Like, you've made a lot of really mindful observations about yourself and your journey, and analyses of where things are coming from, and kind of like going through this process over time. And so just because you just started HRT and you're sort of really moving into this, how do I get my body to reflect what I've got going on the inside? Not to minimize individuals who have already like been doing HRT for a long time, but everybody's journey is different, right? And everybody, like, the inside and outside journeys don't always match, right? So
clearly, yeah.
we all come at our own time, and imposter syndrome is real for lots of things. So yeah, you're definitely not alone in that. Since we're nearing the 3-hour mark, Peach posted this question. So this is a perfect wrap-up question to kind of like spin it down, to dial it down. Peach posted this question towards the beginning, and I wanted to save it to the end. She says, does interviewing others give you more insight into yourself?
Absolutely.
And I'd love to hear about that compared to your experience being interviewed.
The point of the episode is their story. In the moment, I love sharing mine, but then when I'm reviewing it later, I'm like, oh no, like, it's not about me, it's about them. So being interviewed, obviously, like, I've gone way too long on it. We've heard 3 freaking hours because I just keep, blabbing. But it goes back to what I was saying about joining Toastmasters, and like, I finally have something to say, and there's been this part of me that's taken so long to get out, and then I found like I had something I wanted to talk about. So being able to finally just get that out and really share it, like, I could just gush forever. And that's why it was funny, because you asked me Jess's question about the community, and I'm like, oh, that's really hard, because that's not about me. That's about, what's going on outside of that. And that kind of, I hit a little bit of a wall there, because I'm like, well, I can talk about me forever, because like, this part of me has needed to come out for so long. And this is my standing on the mountaintop, shouting it out finally moment. Interviewing other people, talking to other people, hearing their stories. But especially in the context of being able to ask the follow-up questions right there and steer the conversation and everything, it's given me a great deal of power. A little bit of a power trip, but also it's so wonderful to have that, and to really kind of selfishly steer the conversation to hear from my guests the things that will help me the most, the things that are I'm most concerned about. I try to make the questions generic and helpful to all trans people. But like I said, selfishly, a lot of it, the steering that I do is for it to find the things that I resonate with, and to help me in a way. So God, yeah, that's exactly what this show does, is it really helps me most of all. And that's the wonderful thing about that. I hadn't really kind of realized that until now, the selfish aspect of it. And everything we do in life, you could really dial it down to a selfish act, but it really is wonderful having this, being able to not only hear these stories, but massage and steer them in a way that gets to the things that I'm dealing with the most and I need the most help with. And I just hope along the lines that those are the same things that you are feeling out there, and that they help you.
And how does it feel to be on the other end of the microphone this time?
Like I said, it's pretty wonderful. I could clearly talk about myself forever, and my journey, and how hard it was, and how wonderful it's been to finally get over some of those hurdles and to be me. It's really wonderful. Talk about euphoria. being able to share this in this way. Before Toastmasters, I would probably have been absolutely terrified. I would have been hesitating a lot. But now I really feel like it's time. I'm me. I accept me. I'm Emily, and this is my story, and it's just wonderful to be at that place.
That should be your tagline for this episode. I'm me. I'm here. I'm me. I'm Emily, and this is my story. I think every piece of your story is incredibly valuable and touching, and has something that resonates with each of us, regardless of our situation. I think it's incredibly brave and powerful to share your story, and I think that really people connect through stories. Like, you can give people the lessons learned, like the little punchlines, all day. Just believe in yourself, be confident. But when you hear the stories that others share, and you get to understand what lies beneath those words and beneath those lessons and beneath those punchlines, that's really where we connect with people. And that's really where it can start to change those internal landscapes as we're kind of each going across our own journeys. So I would encourage you to cut it into a two-parter, keep it, don't trim it, just leave it, because it's those stories that really grab people, and you sharing your story that's so powerful, and that's going to touch someone that finds the thing that they need to hear.
Mm-hmm. I hope so. And it's wonderful to be able to share, and the key is, if it helps anybody, if it helps one person out there not feel ashamed, not feel self-hatred, and sure as shit not feel suicidal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because we're all more alike than we are different, and nobody's as alone as they think they are.
Would you please, would you go ahead and plug your book?
So my book is called Houses of Light, and it's a children's style book, and it's basically about this idea that there's a light that's inside all of us, and various things in our lives happen to make that light grow bigger or that light to shrink down. And but at the end of the day, as long as we're breathing, as long as we're living, that light exists, and there's always the opportunity for that light to grow. And so by doing things like we're doing today, like sharing stories and connecting, and by doing kind things for other people, whether it's a kind comment or a smile, or it's hard to smile now in masks, but these small moments that we have where we sort of share pieces of our light, that helps our own light grow, and it helps the light in others grow. And as we share our light, we actually become greater than the sum of our parts, because that's what we have. So I encourage you to look at it. If you feel moved, you can read it for free on Blurb. You can order the hardcover on Blurb as well. But you can read it for free, because it's really about the message for me. And if it moves you, like I said, you can order it on Blurb, or there's a soft cover on Amazon that's a little bit cheaper. And you can just Google Houses of Light. There may also be a link on the Blurb. I really appreciate you letting me interview you. I'm really honored to be able to do that and help you share your story. And you clearly have such a involved and supportive community, and I know I met you before you had that, and so I'm so stoked to see that you found people that you can really resonate with and be toxic with on Toxic Tuesday, and that you can share part of your journey with, and they can share their journeys with you, so that collectively we all know we're not alone.
Andy, I love you. Thank you. Everybody here in the chat, your questions, thank you so much. I love you guys, and we'll see you on Tuesday.
All right. Love you, Emily. Thank you.